Look here, you can't do this kind of work without believing in something, honey. So I
Preach.
preach. No, you do have to be tethered to a force. You have to be tethered to something that you truly believe in that can guide you. Because why? You're coming in contact with a lot of different energies in this space. There's nothing short of mental, physical, emotional, spiritual warfare that you are walking through. And when you make that decision, or where you're called to pick up that stick and he's calling you to walk in that direction, to be his advocate, there's a lot to consider. And yes, it's scary. I'm not going to lie to you and say it hasn't been. And what did I do? I just kept walking scared. So you just keep moving forward. You can trip, stumble, whatever. Just do it forward, because there's nothing back here.
Hey everyone, let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. So, today, my guest is Megan Harris, and Megan is running for political office in the infamous or famous Fulton County, Georgia. She's running to be on the Board of Commissioners. She's running for a District 2 seat against a longtime incumbent by the name of Bob Ellis. And I have a conversation with Megan about why she's running for office, and quite a bit about her personally and what inspires her and what drives her. And I loved the conversation. I thought that she really shared the depth of her spirit when it came to her spirituality, when it came to the loss of her brother who passed away not long ago, and why public service is important to her. I did reach out to Bob Ellis and his office because on I also wrote a story on the campaign, on the race, I should say, between Bob and Megan, and for Supporter Report, who is who I write for. And I'll put a link to that in the description of this episode. But he did not respond to my efforts to talk with him. And I also had hoped that he could also be on the podcast, because I understand that he is a spiritual person as well. But we have Megan, and this episode is in two parts. As we were talking, there was a technical issue on her side when it came to the video part. So in part two, it is predominantly audio, but it's so fruitful, such a fruitful conversation. And here in part one, we have video with Megan. So just to share a little bit more about her, she was born in Atlanta, and she ran for office, actually for a local city council office a few years ago. And she didn't win, but she did very well. And the city that she was running in, and the city she lives in, is actually the city that I live in. And I have seen this city transform in many ways over the last 14, 15 years, where it has become very much a melting pot. It's an affluent city of older white residents, but there is a growing mix of diversity in the city. There's a contrast between, unfortunately, and even people in holding office would say this, unfortunately, between the haves and the have-nots in the city. There is a homeless element here where we live, which is Sandy Springs, Georgia. There are people who um, live in apartments, and which is not always looked favorably on, and in this city by longtime residents, unfortunately. And there are people who own their homes and have lived in their homes for years and years. And so there's been a growing understanding of the everyday working person in the city. Often in the past, if you were um, a nurse or you were a police officer or a fireman, you weren't able to really, and you worked for the city, much less someone who worked in the restaurant industry. If you worked in this city, you couldn't necessarily live here unless there was some special break that you got on your rent if you were renting. I remember years ago, someone who her office, I believe she was a director in planning, I believe, and uh, she was so instrumental in the inner workings of the city, and she couldn't afford to live here, and she had to find a home. She had to buy a home in another city. Hopefully, that is changing, but there is a growing understanding of the hard times that are out here and the differences between people, and a growing acceptance and embracing of diversity in this city. But the main thing is that what we talk about is really these are universal things that go on in your community, regardless of where you live. These are things that you can relate to when it comes to loss, when it comes to family, when it comes to your own inspirations and passions and your dreams, your drive and your purpose. And also when it comes to uh, the local issues that are going on where you live. Here in the metro Atlanta area in Fulton County, the jail is a serious issue. There has been a number of deaths there, whether they were murders or suicides, or we don't know. There's been a number of problems there that um, the state has stepped into, the state legislature has stepped into to address. So there's a lot going on here, as you know, if you watch the national news. There's a lot going on, but uh, today we have Megan Harris, and I'm really looking forward to you getting to know her. So here is part one with Megan Harris. Let's get started. Let's meet her, and let's start healing.
Sure.
Welcome, Megan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm very happy that you are here on Let's Start Healing.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's not too hot outside, not too cold.
Yeah,
So I'm eager for the fall to come in, sweater weather.
absolutely. Absolutely. And you are running for office.
Yep.
And I mean, we're going to get into a few different things, but I am just so, you're running for office in Fulton County, Georgia. And I'm just so wondering what inspired you to want to run for a Fulton County office. And do you have service in your blood? Because you did run for city council of the city of Sandy Springs and did very well, even though the incumbent won, but you did very well.
Thank you. So yeah, in short, it was a snowballing effect. I would say I've always been connected to the community as community advocate, activist, always serving. That's how we were raised. That's how we grew up in our church as well. So as I got further involved after buying my home here in Sandy Springs, which is in Fulton County, I was super excited, new homeowner. I was like, oh wait, and we're a relatively young city. So if y'all recall, Sandy Springs didn't incorporate till 2005. So the excitement of being a part of a city build is where I was coming from with that. I was like, I get to be a part of this. So I started going to my meetings, the development meetings that they would have, talking about the North End redevelopment project, and further educating myself, meeting people. And so I just got drawn in, especially when I noticed like a lot of the meaty conversations that I thought we were having on a community side
Yeah.
weren't really starting to roll out. I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? There's a disconnect. So I leaned further in. And that's around that time where I was running for for Sandy Springs City Council back in 2021 during our pandemic. And I that was a heck of an experience. I say that where like the experience of going out knocking on doors. I'm not afraid to meet people. I don't know strangers. So that wasn't really a big deterrent for me. But kind of walking into the belly of the beast of politics was definitely an interesting journey. I love the people I got a chance to get to meet while I was strangers that I got to meet on the streets, at grocery stores, knocking on their doors, listening to their issues, learning about new issues. I did not realize at that time that we had such an issue with our deer population in our district. And I did not know that you can hunt on people's personal property and within the city lines either. I went to school in Carrollton, and that's more rural, and so that's not as uncommon because you're outside city limits like that. But that I gained a new wealth of knowledge just from those interactions. And then I went further in even afterwards. I matriculated through the Leadership Sandy Springs program, which is now rebranded Leadership Perimeter. Became Rotarian as well. I'm also on the board for our Sandy Springs Perimeter Chamber of Commerce as well.
Yeah. And so again, that is so that's a lot. That's a commitment, which you just described. And Fulton County to me is different, obviously, from city government. We're talking about county government. And sometimes Fulton County to me can be like an abyss. It's a lot. It's hard, or it can be hard to get in touch with people and get things done. And obviously, that there's a lot of issues, in Fulton County. So what made you want to say, I want to tackle this? And you are running against a longtime incumbent.
I am. So there are some similarities there between the two races from my first one to this one. That first race, I was also running against an incumbent. His name was John Paulson. And we're great acquaintances and friends at this point too. And we don't have term limits. We don't have term limits on our municipal level, but we also do not have term limits on our local government level as it pertains to Fulton County Commission as well. So it's very easy for someone to get into that role. And then you just kind of sit there and stay. And then your pay goes up every year while you're there too. So there's not really a lot of incentive to kind of pass the torch for that matter. But I got tired of shaking my head and decided to throw my hat in the ring is the sum of it, to be honest. We do have a lot of different issues throughout Fulton County, but one of the things that I bring up in conversation is that North Fulton, there's like this myth that North Fulton doesn't have the same issues as the rest of Fulton County. And we absolutely do. We have a housing affordability issue. We have homelessness that's in our backyard here too. Our kids are suffering with mental and behavioral health issues, and parents are at a loss of what to do next. So we share the same issues, and we need to make sure that we are connected in, and people in our backyard are aware of the resources that Fulton County provides fitting those issues. That, for one thing to remember, we're already paying for with our tax dollars. So seeing those tax dollars reflected in our own backyard is essential, because when we're looking at that information on a leadership standpoint on how to best serve our communities, we're looking at participation rates. We're looking at that data. And if people do not know about these resources, then we're looking at bad data and we're making judgments off bad data. So when we're talking about sustainability funding for programs, or when we're auditing that program to see, hey, is this something that's still a need in the community, or has the trend changed? Because communities change, which is exactly what has happened in North Fulton over the last 10 years, is that we've had a migration of people come from down in the city, from more of the heartbeat of Atlanta, also migrating from other areas, Florida, other states. I know we got a lot of people from Jersey here and New York too. So, which is exciting, because what does that add up to be? It brings cultural and background diversity, and also age diversity as well. But with that said, when we have those kind of movements and changes, you have to be on the ground floor to pay attention to have a pulse check on what the trend is. And if you're not outside, you're not going to know.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is the biggest differentiator between myself and my opponent is I'm outside and I like being outside and connecting with people so that we can make sure that we are answering the problems of today instead of having an antiquated approach and doing a one size fits all when it doesn't fit.
Having a one size fits all. So do you feel a little bit like some of the people who are less fortunate may come from, may have lower incomes in their households? Do you feel like they get enough attention in a one size fits all concept?
Not necessarily. Um, the reason why is so every city will have like their own kind of culture, their own flavor, if you will. So in District 2, there are 5 different cities. That's Milton, Mountain Park, Sandy Springs, Roswell, and Alpharetta. And then we have 15 cities that equals to Metro Atlanta as well. And every city is going to have a slightly different vibe that you need to pay attention to. So your homeless community can look a little different. There could be different reasonings. And so you just want to make sure that you have that in the room of consideration when you're developing solutions.
Yeah, and in a moment I want to ask you about your spirituality and how you stay connected to you, especially during these times. But Sandy Springs, I have been in and around Sandy Springs for decades. I didn't leave the state for about 10 years, but I've lived back in Sandy Springs since 2005, but I first came to Sandy Springs in 1981. So I have seen the evolution of this city. And
Yeah.
I always think that Sandy Springs is a microcosm of the country. There's so many dynamics in this city that I think speak to the rest of the country.
Right.
Well, especially when it comes to race, when it comes to people who are underprivileged, people who are struggling. And then we have people who are very wealthy, very affluent
Right.
in the city. And so how does that land for you in the work that you want to do if you are elected to office?
So one is I want to celebrate it more. These different backgrounds, and a great example of showcasing that celebration was us actually bringing about Juneteenth in Sandy Springs. So I was a part of the original group that brought about the first Juneteenth celebration in Sandy Springs. It was myself and 4 other neighbors came together when we realized that we had nothing on the docket a few years ago. I think 2022. We came together, combined our resources, and we made it happen right there in City Springs. And then we had the second one. The first one brought out almost 1,000 folks, and then the second one doubled that number. And we were very intentional about, how we organized the engagement with the community. We wanted to make sure we were supporting Black-owned businesses and highlighting them, having the city notice them. So when the city puts on their own programs and shows and whatnot, we have these businesses on the short list, and that's how you elevate other businesses as well. You don't gatekeep. You want to put someone in a position where other people can pick them up too, and that's what helps a business thrive. So taking that and then continuing to expand it on a county level and having a healthier relationship with our small business owner community and our community leaders as well, because they know what's happening right here on the ground level. And when I talk about community leaders, I'm talking about our barbers, our hairstylists. I call them guardians of the community. Think about it. How often do you change your hairstylist, or how often does your son change his barber? You have master barbers here that remember your kids from when they were little tykes all the way up through adulthood, and valuable lessons have been handed down. Sometimes that's the only male influence some of these young men will have. like consistently in their lifetime. And that's valuable. That's gold. That's worth its weight in gold, to make sure that we have healthy engagements and a welcoming spirit, and also a listening ear to those leaders in the community, because that helps us, like I said, design and develop proper solutions, but also helps us with our approach as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And it is something to see the evolution of diversity in the city, especially people being engaged in government, in local government, because I would say 2010, I wasn't seeing that.
Right.
And so now 14 years later, there is a big difference. And that Juneteenth event at the Performing Arts Center literally brought me to tears when
Yeah,
from the
it was exciting.
yes, I mean to see that, and to see culture, and the audience was multicultural. It was the dynamic of it literally brought me to tears from the first performance.
You're right. I have a video that I have saved, and I'll have it forever, where we have a segment when we had our Jolie Kylene. They were doing the African dance tutorial for the children. And when you looked at, you saw Indian children, you saw Asian children, you saw white children, you saw Black children. And I was like, that's what we're about. That was everything. It gives me tingles when I think about it and talk about it now. But that's what made it the whole thing worth it. That's because that's the whole purpose, right? To bring us all together and then showcasing that unity to the next generation.
Right. Right. And are you a native of Carrollton, or where were you born?
So I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. So people ask me where I'm from, I say 285, and this is why. So grew up. My dad stayed in College Park. Mom stayed in Decatur. We grew up in like Stone Mountain, Decatur area, like Wesley Chapel, Flat Shoals Parkway. But for middle school and high school, I was bused. We were in DeKalb County, but I was bused to school to Peachtree Middle and Dunwoody High School. Before my mom actually officially moved to Sandy Springs, right after I had graduated. My brother was 2.5 years behind me. So when I came back home from college, I landed here in Sandy Springs, and then I subsequently bought my first home here in Sandy Springs as well. But College Park, Welcome All Park, that's, growing up down on the south side too, and going to Live Oak Baptist Church. I mean, we were old school. It was great. We had the mothers that would wear all white and the hats on Easter, of course, and the deacons. My dad was a lifetime deacon. So,
Wow.
so I have some Southern roots there. Yes.
Yes, I know College Park. I'm doing a lot on College Park these days.
Yes.
So that's awesome. That's awesome. Do you consider yourself are you a spiritual person? How would you describe yourself?
Look here, you can't do this kind of work without believing in something, honey. So I preach. No, you do have to be tethered to a force. You have to be tethered to something that you truly believe in, that can guide you. Because why? You're coming in contact with a lot of different energies in this space. There's nothing short of mental, physical, emotional, spiritual warfare that you are walking through. And, when you make that decision, or where you're called to pick up that stick and he's calling you to walk in that direction, to be his advocate, there's a lot to consider. And yes, it's scary. I'm not going to lie to you and say it hasn't been. And what did I do? I just kept walking scared. So just keep moving forward. You can trip, stumble, whatever, just do it forward, because there's nothing back here for you. So that's what I lean into. So I am very spiritual. I meditate. I talk to God about it. Look, there's been many a night I've been on my back porch right over here with a glass of wine saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure you sure I should just add some community service hours or something?" So in a whole conversation. So, which I think, and that's the whole point, right? Us being able to talk with him and consult with him and petition him, and, be scared in front of him. And it's okay. He'll still be by your side and walk with you through this process. And he will have his messages for you. So your job is to make sure that your life is not in such a state of chaos that you can't hear that message, that next instruction. So, and it doesn't, it can be as little as 2 inches is what I say. To give God 2 inches so he can talk to you. You got to keep that help line open for him to reach you. And as long as you do that, then the rest of it, those next steps will materialize in front of you as you're walking forward. Even when with your vision, sometimes it's easier to close your eyes, because with your eyes open, you'll see all the distractions. But if you just lead, if you're leading with your heart, just keep walking forward through this thicket, through this storm, and becoming stronger as well. And then making sure that, you keep looking for him, in every interaction, keep looking for him, because he will talk to you through anyone. So that debunks the whole thing about prejudice. You got to be careful. It's a tricky thing, because God will talk to you through someone you never thought. It could be your enemy. It could be anyone like that. Doesn't necessarily mean you got to be holding hands, skipping down the road, but you got to at least have your ears open to hear that message and then keep it moving.
So many gems you just dropped just now. Really. And the keeping the chaos away and keeping the chaos down is so wise and true, because then we can't hear and we can't see, because there's just too much noise.
Yeah, we're the best at standing in our own way. So with our team, what we do is we keep self-care as a line item on all of our agendas at the top, just as a check-in, because that's real. You got to give yourself some space, because that helps lessen the chaos and so on and so forth. We're all smart people here. We see the data and whatnot. But the thing is that we just never apply it to ourselves. Right. So actively doing that, we use each other as accountability partners. In that, just to make sure. So if we notice that someone didn't do anything, we're like, okay, we need to push for, check in, like a little extra text, like, hey, did you give yourself some time today? Just checking in. It's crucially important.
When would you say you feel the presence of God the most? In what moments do you feel like you're actually having that interaction with the presence of God?
Oh man, when I'm probably out here in these streets talking and pontificating, and what it feels like, I feel like I'm on fire. That my whole body temperature goes up, and I know that's when, like at the beginning, even with the fear, sometimes you get shaky boots, right? But I would find when I leaned in, I found comfort in that. Like I felt like I was on fire. It was oozing out of my pores, the passion that lies here in this space with me. And then my own realization of, oh my gosh, this fits how I'm designed. And I never would have thought it. This was not on my vision board 10 years ago. I was never on SGA in high school or anything. I was just bossy and had a smart mouth as far as my mom was concerned. And I like being outside. So helping folks out, like whether we're doing something for a community garden. So that was never was afraid of the hard work. That wasn't an issue, but I feel like I'm on fire. And I know it went from, okay, this is going to be an important thread in my life, to this is like a major action scene in my overall tapestry. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see what's going to lie ahead. I don't know what the ultimate goal is, what I'm supposed to be when I grow up. But I also find comfort in, I understand why he took that from me, because some people have visions differently. Some people will have the title and they see it, and then they can go that way. And then how he saw fit with me, I'm not exactly sure what the ultimate end goal is, aside from winning this race. But like when people say, what's next after that, I'm like, so I'm not quite sure. I'm waiting for that instruction, because what I would do with that information, because I live in my head and I know I do, I would overthink and overanalyze it. So he was like, let me just go ahead and take this away from you. And so it's like, okay.
Take what away from you? Take what away from you? Thank you for joining us. Please tune in to part 2 with Megan Harris. The conversation only gets better.